From accusations of using steroids to straight-up domestic violence, these are times UFC fans got angry with Dana White. UFC President Dana White is one of the most controversial figures in sports. Fans have been quick to hold him accountable over the years and call him out for what is sometimes some pretty shady behavior. However, no matter what trouble Dana White seems to get into, he always seems to come out relatively unscathed. But let's talk about the different times White has gotten fans riled up. In 2023, Dana White underwent a serious body transformation, seemingly getting ripped overnight. He claimed that his transformation took over 3 years of intense dieting and working out, but fans had other ideas. Many were quick to comment on social media that White had the appearance of someone abusing steroids. While these comments were widely unfounded, that didn't stop White from having to defend himself against some outraged fans. The main issue was that White was notorious for being adamantly against steroid use. The head of the UFC being accused of using steroids was not a good look, and many fans still believe that illegal substances were how he got in shape in such a short period of time. Other people believed that White's transformation was simply an endorsement for a healthcare plan sold by a company that he had recently invested in. This made the news and story surrounding his transformation feel ingenuine to a lot of fans. We may never know the truth behind the allegations, but it definitely made for some juicy gossip at the time. It's tough being the guy in charge, especially when your employees are UFC fighters with big personalities and bigger attitudes. UFC fans are the same way and have been quick to call out White over his treatment of UFC fighters throughout the years. Anytime there has been a big dispute between White and a fighter, you can bet that there are fans lining up to defend him. Fighters in the UFC and their fans have been pushing for higher pay for many years now, but White simply won't budge. In 2022, it was estimated that UFC fighters are paid only around 20% of the total revenue from the sport. As you can imagine, many fighters over the years have tried to take a bigger cut, but White holds firm that they are paid what they deserve. Because of the way the UFC contracts are set up currently, being labeled as independent contractors, the fighters are unable to effectively unionize due to legal difficulty. This means that there is no real way for UFC fighters to bargain for higher pay like other sports leagues like the NFL, NBA, and MLB, which are estimated to share around 50% of the total revenue with the players. This is a frustrating situation for fighters and fans that is not likely to change anytime soon. Of course, this doesn't stop them from being upset about it and voicing their opinions. In fact, one of the most famous UFC disputes of all time was between UFC veteran Tito Ortiz and Dana White over pay-per-view revenue. Although these two were actually pretty good friends for a while, Ortiz got tired of being what he equated to essentially a slave for the UFC and publicly stated that he felt the fighters were not getting enough of the profits. Now, it's worth mentioning that Ortiz was one of the highest paid UFC fighters in the sport at the time, but the point he was trying to make still resonated with a lot of people. White would of course rebuke the claims fighters were underpaid, and a long feud between the two would begin. At one point, things got so heated between the two that a boxing match was planned that would allow these two to work out their differences in the ring. Ultimately, these plans fell through, but it was an exciting end to a messy battle between the two. Press conferences and social media are not the only places Dana White seems to upset UFC fans, as his frequent media appearances are packed with rage-baiting moments. In late 2020, journalists began to criticize White's decision to continue scheduling UFC fights during the early stages of the pandemic. If you know anything about Dana White, you can imagine he didn't take this well. White has always had a strained relationship with the media, and this sparked several rants against several media outlets, including The Guardian. During one of those rants, White dropped some homophobic slurs on social media, outraging many people online, UFC fans included. White was eventually forced to apologize to the LGBTQ+ community but his hatred for the media seems to have only gotten stronger. In fact, White was quick to defend UFC fighter Colby Covington against the media in interviews when they pushed back against some racist comments he made. Fans were quick to label White as supporting racism, and even some fighters were side-eyeing his response to the whole situation. Of course, White would refute these allegations, but it still left a sour taste in the mouth of UFC fans all over the world. Fans are clearly passionate about the integrity of the UFC as a sport and have often accused White of prioritizing profits over quality matchups. One example of this is the way that he seems to prioritize fighters like Conor McGregor when scheduling title fights. After it was announced that McGregor would be getting a title fight after 2 losses in a row and a long hiatus, fans were rightfully upset and began to question White's motives for the matchup. His response to the upset fans was simply to call them idiots and tell them to calm down. He really doesn't mince words, does he? It's clear that Dana White doesn't let the hate get to him, as he is frequently out seen living his best life on social media, but he had yet to face his biggest controversy, which would really push his luck in the public eye farther than ever. After welcoming in the 2023 New Year at a San Lucas nightclub, Dana and his wife Anna White were filmed getting into a physical altercation that resulted in the two smacking each other around a little, much to the horror of onlookers. The two would trade slaps before being separated by other members of the party. After TMZ got a hold of the footage, it was all downhill from there for a little while for White. Fans and the media blasted him for slapping his wife, and his reputation seemed like it was going to take a big hit. He was surprisingly accountable for the whole incident, and while blaming it on booze, admitted that there was no excuse for his actions. This approach to the situation likely helped reduce the blow to his reputation, as he was candid about the incident and was genuinely sorry for the way he acted. Anna White would also go on to say in an interview with TMZ that the whole incident was behind them, and they had both apologized to each other. It remains to be seen whether this incident will blow over with fans, though, who now believe they've seen a different side of White. For now, at least, it seems like White has avoided another potential cancellation. Who knows how he keeps doing it or how long till he pushes UFC fans too far. After the footage of the incident on New Year's began to circulate, articles started to pop up discussing the fact that there was really no one in the UFC to punish White for unsavory behavior. This is likely why he is able to get away with so much without ever really getting into trouble with the company. That doesn't stop fans from being angry with him, and they are quick to voice their disapproval any time White steps on their toes. People do tend to give him the benefit of the doubt most of the time, as White is generally a favorable character among UFC fans. His big personality is right for the job, and it's hard to imagine how the UFC would be with someone else in charge. So, from accusations of using steroids to straight-up domestic violence, these are times UFC fans got angry at Dana White.